The Rolex Daytona Unicorn, famous for being one of the most expensive watches ever, after selling for millions at an auction, do you know it also has a large shadow of controversy hovering around it? In recent years, questions have been raised about its authenticity. On one hand, some experts believe the timepiece was an elaborate sham, but on the other, the watch itself was what it was claimed to be, an authentic Rolex Unicorn. Today, we'd be looking into both sides of the argument and their perspectives to get a closer look at the bone of contention and perhaps come to a conclusion. Commanding a price tag of $5.9 million, did you know this one-of-a-kind Rolex Daytona 6265, known as the Unicorn, is the second most expensive Rolex to ever be sold at an auction? To further buttress how crazy the sum is, the figure bought at a Phillips auction in Geneva was $100,000 shy of being twice its expected value of $3 million. Adding to the beauty of the timepiece, did you know it's the only vintage white gold Rolex Cosmograph Daytona to be ever produced? It is a unicorn after all. Sold by the renowned watch collector John Goldberger, the proceeds from the auction were donated to the charity Children Action. Having said all that, are you starting to wonder why this watch is so controversial? Well, it all boils down to some hazy metrics that raised a couple of eyebrows regarding its sale. We promise to go into the details from both perspectives, reasons why it could be a counterfeit and reasons why it's authentic, right? Well, how about we start with the latter? One of the most prominent experts who can undoubtedly vouch for the authenticity of the Rolex Daytona Unicorn is the famous watch collector John Goldberger. Was there any doubt though? Personally, examining the watch, if there's one man who can truly attest to its authenticity, it has to be him. Plus, he has also waxed lyrical about it. With his reputation as a famous collector and author, would he be willing to let it all go? In addition to Goldberger's endorsement, some other factors worth considering may just point to the direction of the Unicorn being certified authentic. The intricate attention to detail needed to create the dial suggests it was undoubtedly made by a skilled craftsman. Surely we are aware that counterfeit timepieces are becoming more and more deceptive, but they'd surely be discovered by the trained eye. This brings us to the next point. Let's say the timepiece is nothing but a counterfeited product. We also have to consider the fact that Phillips, the auction house that sold the Rolex Unicorn, is well respected and reputable. In the world of auctioning vintage watches, you'd be hard-pressed not to give it its due flowers. As expected, a house of such stature would thoroughly examine the timepiece before putting it up for auction. So, despite all that, why exactly do some people still think the auctioned Rolex Unicorn was fake? The major reason for the theory, or allegations, depending on how you're looking at it, all boils down to one reason. The watch wasn't sold through an authorized dealer. With Rolex not officially authenticating the timepiece, how would the allegations get debunked? To this very day, several watch enthusiasts and experts still believe the timepiece underwent some alterations that should have affected its value. When the pictures of the watch were uploaded shortly before the auction took off, the markings on the case were identical and all of its screw head positions perfectly matched. In case you didn't know, the latter indicates that the movement of the watch wasn't serviced between 2010 and 2018, as the screw heads would have been in a different position. However, just shortly after the pictures were released, something crazy happened. The auction house published an interview with John Goldberger disclosing that the watch took part in some form of restoration. The fact that this happened in such haste shortly before the auction had started was enough to raise some eyebrows. Frankly speaking, the pushers and bezel of the Unicorn had been remanufactured. The million-dollar question, though, is by whom? Could we trust it was done by Rolex? If it wasn't, wouldn't that mean those parts were fake? The fact that such crucial unknowns surround the timepiece makes it so strange and possibly untrustworthy. However, Ben Clymer stated concerning this, "As we all know, if Goldberger says it's good, it's good." Taking Goldberger's words may be the only confirmation of authenticity available right now, but is that close to enough? Adding fuel to the flames is the questionable movement of the timepiece. The Unicorn movement may have remained in the same condition as found in 2010, but it still has some controversies. The Unicorn movement is an early caliber 727 version that was introduced with reference 6262 and 6264, some of which were later modified by Rolex to create the first examples of reference 6263 and 6265 with screw-down pushers. The auction piece had several components that were from much older movements. Here lies the problem. If the Unicorn was created from scratch at the time, wouldn't that mean it would feature a more recent version of the caliber 727? It's clear to see that the piece has been substantially modified and thus shouldn't demand such a heavy sum, no matter what. Then again, it's worth adding that the heavy allegations placed on the Unicorn have neither fully been debunked nor confirmed. It's hardly any surprise that the authenticity remains heavily speculated to this very day. However, if the account of Goldberger is true, and the Unicorn was an authentic watch that happened to lose some of its parts in the most shocking manner, it's easy to see why it was fixed. A watch of such stature doesn't deserve to be tossed aside. To be fair though, this heated debate would have been necessary if the authorities had just come clean with the undiluted story. Whether or not it had been remodeled with unofficial parts, the Rolex unicorn would have undoubtedly sold for a high price, especially given it came from the legendary Goldberger, and of course the fact that its proceeds would be directly benefiting charity. Speaking of charity, there's something we'd like to add. Did you know neither Goldberger nor Phillips publicly disclosed how much money went to the Children Action Foundation? The fact that there are conflicting statements about what amount was donated makes things even weirder. Hodinkee originally disclosed all proceeds were given to charity, but according to SJX Watches, only the net proceeds were sent out, whatever that means. There are also whispers that only a tiny amount of the $5.9 million chest was given. Given that members of the affluent class tend to be extremely vocal about their charity works and benevolent donations to the needy, don't you find this weird? Well, we guess the truth may remain one of the mysteries that we may never know. The major takeaway from today's video is that Rolex remains one of the most iconic luxury watch brands in the world. Year after year, the watchmaker annually sells hundreds of thousands of watches worldwide, a testament to its popularity and elite status. The demand for Rolex watches still stands so high. But the flip side of this is, just like many other brands, a booming market would certainly birth a cold-blooded, malicious market for fake or counterfeited watches. If you aren't careful, getting a Rolex watch from a secondary market or possibly even an auction can cost you thousands for an identical counterfeit. Even the most trained eyes in the world can still struggle from time to time. As a matter of fact, an interesting survey was made by William May, a vintage jewellery specialist. Conducted in Britain, so many people couldn't even differentiate between an original Swiss watch from a counterfeited model. According to Insider, William May asked up to 1,000 people in the United Kingdom to determine which watch was real from two images, one showing a fake model and one showing a real Rolex. Surprisingly, only 30% guessed correctly. Do you know what that means? Only around 300 people who were randomly asked got the watch correctly. It clearly indicates that counterfeited models are getting more similar to authentic ones. But does this mean the entire watch world would be held at a standstill? Certainly not. There are still some ways you can fish out an elaborate sham. To start with, Rolex watches are simply flawless in design. The brand itself takes a lot of care to continually guarantee the quality, so they thoroughly inspect everything that leaves its facility. You'd never find an authentic Rolex model with crooked lettering or one that is unevenly spaced. Having said that, should you notice the font and/or lettering looks weird in any way, you should drop it right away, as it is a major red flag you shouldn't ignore. Another thing you should note is that the model and serial numbers will tell you everything you need to know about any given Rolex timepiece. Don't forget to thoroughly vet the aforementioned numbers. In a case where it doesn't match the timepiece you're holding, say, for instance, the serial number on an 18K yellow gold Rolex in your hands turns out to be one for a stainless steel model, just take a deep sigh of relief. Be rest assured you've discovered it to be a replica.